Welcome to Grow and Go with M. Tyler, where we gather together with the aim of growing in our relationship with God, growing in our understanding of who He is and who we are in light of that, so that we can go into the fullness of all He is calling us to. Sometimes I'll be chatting with guests as we learn from their stories. Other times it'll be me sharing messages I've preached or the inner workings of how I'm growing and going in the current season. But whatever we're doing, it's all for the glory of God and the good of others. So pull up a chair, enjoy your drive, get the cleaning done, or whatever else you want to do while listening. And let's get ready to grow and go. Today on the podcast, I am excited to be joined by Christie Thomas. Christie was a children's ministries director for over a decade and is now a family discipleship coach to parents who need equipping, support, and encouragement. Her devotionals and children's books help parents cultivate faith-filled moments with their kids. She lives with her husband and 3 boys in Canada. Christie, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me here today.
I'm so excited. We've been put in touch by a mutual friend. And as somebody who has dabbled for not a decade, but at various points within the world of children's ministry and youth work and all age services and all sorts of different things, I was like, oh, yes, this is a topic that I am very passionate about. And I also absolutely love your Instagram handle, which we will put all of that in the show notes. But I would love to just start by asking, can you unpack why your handle is as it is on Instagram?
Absolutely. Well, it is Little Shoots, Deep Roots. And my goal is to help parents know that they can disciple their kids without having to know it all or do it all. So the Little Shoots refers to both, your children, but it also refers to the little things that we do in our life that make a big difference in the long run. And that leads to deep faith roots in our kids. So Little Shoots, Deep Roots.
Oh, it's so good. And I think even that alone is going to free some people right there and then, because the number of times as a pastor's wife, and I have 3 children also, people will ask me, oh, what are you doing with your children? Or like, how do I do X? Or should I be doing this every day? And sometimes I think there's this unspoken assumption that everybody else is sitting down for 3 hours every night with the Bible open, having these deeply spiritual moments around a bonfire, strumming their guitar as a family. And you're left there going, I can barely put eggs on toast for my kids without raising my voice. So how on earth am I going to display Jesus to them? So I would love to hear a little bit more about some of your story, but let's start with, how has working in children's ministries helped you learn more about God?
Oh, how is it? Working in children's ministry has been super fantastic for me. So I started volunteering in children's ministries when I was essentially a child. I was 12. So I've been involved with it for very many years. I won't tell you how many, because then you'll know how many gray hairs I have. It's a lot. It's been 30 years. We'll just keep it at that. So I was doing it as a volunteer, and then I worked in children's ministry. And as a children's ministry director, I felt like when I was preparing lessons, either for teaching or preparing curriculum, it drew me so much closer to the heart of God as I learned how to look at the Bible and say, okay, what does this mean for children today? It helped me learn so much about who God is and what He wants for us. So, that's kind of like a very, nebulous up there. I don't know if I have any specific stories of.
No, I think that's so true. And that was exactly my experience as well. Because if you're trying to teach something to somebody else, particularly to children, you can't use big fancy theological words. You can't get lost in all of the kind of fluff around it. You have to be really straightforward and really clear. And I think it's something that a lot of speakers and preachers could be mindful of when they're talking to adults as well, is that, what is the one thing that we want this child or this person to go away with? What's the truth, or what's the element of God's character that we're trying to understand? And the number of times that, in fact, we did during lockdown, when we were still living in New Zealand, my husband and I had a whole church studio from the kitchen, as many vicars and ministers did. And we had, just before lockdown in our kids ministry, been going through a series pinpointing the Old Testament characters and creating a narrative and a timeline of where everybody fit in, to try and get this overall picture of
the story of the Bible and the narrative and the, where was Jesus in it all, and how did these people fit in, and the people of God, and here they are, and then they are, and the kingdom is splitting, and and so we created this timeline, and we had this big board, and we carried on doing it through lockdown in little bite-sized pieces as part of the service. And the adults in the church, ranging from 18 through to 70, 80 plus, so many of them were like, this was amazing. I learned so much. I am so encouraged by seeing this. I didn't know about this, or I now understand the divided kingdom, which I didn't get before. And it's when you think, okay, how am I going to explain this to a child, that suddenly the truth of it can come alive for yourself as well. So I am a big advocate for everybody should do kids work at some point in their life, because also churches often struggle to find people, don't they? So why, you've kind of had this shift from children's ministry particularly into more family discipleship. Can you unpack that a little bit more and say how that's come about and what your passion is in it now?
For sure. Well, many, many years ago, before I had children, and my oldest is 15 now, I took a team of volunteers and we went to a children's ministry conference. And most of the time at the children's ministry conference, they actually talked about family ministry, which kind of threw me for a loop. I thought, you're telling me that I need to do all this extra stuff now, and that parents actually have more influence. That it really blew my mind, because I had grown up, I went to church, I went to Sunday school, I went to my Wednesday evening program, and it was the church that discipled me. My parents were Christians, but we didn't talk about faith at home. This was not something that we did. So I just assumed you go to church, you do church things, you go home, you do home things. It was all very compartmentalized for me. So going to this conference, I thought, oh, this isn't what I expected. I didn't realize any of this. So I started kind of dabbling in it a little bit. The person who was speaking there at the conference was Mark Holman, and he had a curriculum that children's pastors could use to do family faith formation at church, even if you weren't, really doing it at home yet. So before I even started having children, I had taught a couple of these classes. And a couple of years later, I asked them, did you do that thing that I taught you? Let's do some follow-up here. Are we doing the things that I taught you to do? And they said, yeah, actually, we did it a couple nights. And then the third night we were like, but the kids said, no, Mom, you have to do that thing. Because it was just a very simple thing. It was blessing your child at bedtime. And so the kids latched onto it after the first or second time. And they were like, no, you have to do this to me every night now. And I started hearing not only that, but other stories. One family told me, you know what? Kids were having a lot of nightmares and, bad dreams before that. And they actually stopped. Like when they kind of stopped to assess, they said, my kids stopped having their perpetual nightmares at that time, around that time. That's interesting. And so they started sleeping better and waking up better. And then we were able to get up in the morning and do a Bible study with them every morning. So this is like 16 years ago now that they're starting to tell these stories. And I think, oh, that's great. Yay. What I'm doing is having an impact. Lovely. Hurrah. And then I started doing it with my own children. And then it's taken decades. And I've started realizing, you know what? It's not me. It's what God is doing with the little offering that we give him. So we give him this little thing, this, praying a Bible verse over your child at bedtime. And he takes it and he makes it into something big and beautiful in our child's life. I have seen children who weren't supposed to be able to memorize and apply verses because they had, they were born with brain damage because of what happened to them in the womb. They are able to memorize and interpret these scriptures because they're hearing them every single night for their entire life. It's not like, they're completely different people now, but God is slowly rewiring their brains through this process. I've, so many families have told me their kids stopped having nightmares, and it's not just that one habit, but there are other things that we do too that I think, wow, that is so little that it shouldn't have that big of a ripple effect. Yeah. But it does. And it's because God is God. Yes. And the God that we follow is the God who can take tiny little things like a mustard seed, like 5 loaves and 2 fish, like a tiny, tiny little army, and he can make them ripple out so much farther than we ever could on our own. And in fact, when we sit back and we say, okay, I'm actually going to intentionally keep things little because it reminds me that this I'm not in charge here. I'm not in charge of my child's heart. I can't make my child be a Christian.
Yeah.
When we step back and say, I'm just going to do the little things and then I'm going to trust God, it actually kind of helps us in our mentality too of thinking we have to do all the things in order to make our kids.
Yeah, I think so often we do that as parents. And even if you're not a parent, I think subconsciously you do this when you think about, I should be sharing the gospel, and you put the pressure on yourself that if you're not telling people the gospel in just the right way, or you're not saying Jesus's name X number of times in a conversation or whatever it might be, that they're never going to know God, and you forget that it's the Holy Spirit's work and you are a conduit of what he's up to. And I always love Isaiah 55:11 is kind of a life verse for me, but it talks about God's word and how it goes out and it doesn't return to God empty. It accomplishes what he sends it out to do. And in the same way, when we're engaging with our kids, if we have them, or when we're talking to our friends and our family and our co-workers and just being us, but with God's Spirit in us, God's word will multiply, as you say. It will be fruitful. It will bring in a harvest if we are faithful with that. Now, as I'm listening to you speak, Christie, I'm kind of trying to put myself in different ages and stages of parenting. And if I think back to when my three were younger, and my eldest is 14, so we're really similar age and stage, I think. And there was a season where the idea of having to kind of be in 3 different bedrooms each night, kind of doing one and then the other and then the other, I was tired at the end of the day. So what would be your advice to a parent who is just hitting that end part of the day and going, I don't even know how to do bedtime 3 times over or 4 times over, or I've got a friend who's got 5 kids over, and how do we do that? Because you say it's little things, but already there might be some parents' hearts going, that already feels too much. How do I do this so it's not a big thing and it doesn't become a should and have to and I've got to tick this off the list, but it's a joy and a delight. How do we make that transition?
I think you have to back the train all the way back and say, is this something that God is actually even calling me to in this moment? Maybe God doesn't want you to change your bedtimes. Maybe your bedtimes are just fine. And that is not the right moment for you to be discipling your kids because you're tired and exhausted and cranky. Maybe you do need to just chuck them into bed and move on with your day. Maybe there's another time of day that God wants to redeem in his family. So maybe it's toothbrushing time. And maybe while you're brushing your child's teeth or and then as they grow, you can train them to do this for themselves. Maybe you're singing a Bible verse song with them.
Love it.
May the Lord bless you. Or maybe it's when you're dropping your kids off at school. If your kids are in school, I don't know how prevalent homeschooling is where you are.
I think less prevalent than maybe in the States, but I do have friends who homeschool both here in the UK and a few back in New Zealand who were homeschooling as well. But for the most part, I would say most of my friends and peers, it's carting the kids out the door. Yeah. Maybe they're, doing their own school journey. They're catching a bus or they're walking or whatever. And then you're like, see you later. And then they return however many hours later.
So there's a lot of opportunities in that too. So your kids are leaving the house in the morning. Could you just get yourself ready a minute early and then pray over them as they leave the house? Or maybe you're in the car with them or waiting for the bus with them. Those are also moments that God could redeem. And you don't have to choose all of these. You don't have to say, okay, now I have to do it while we're going out the door and while we're in the car and, but just I would say pray, ask God to show you a time of day that he wants to redeem. And then ask him for an idea of something little that you could do. And you don't want to make it big. Like I know of some people who have these big spiritual conversations in the car every day, but you got to work yourself up to that, right? Like your kids are going to be like, oh my goodness, Mom, stop lecturing me.
Who are you? What have you done with my parent?
Exactly. So let's just start with something small. And I like to think of the small things as, that moment in your day, it's like got this big heavy door in front of it and it's firmly shut to, the idea of bringing God into it. And so instead you just want to do something really tiny and then just kind of cracks the door open. And that's enough, because then once that door is cracked open, one of these days it's going to swing wide. Yeah. Or some of these days it's going to swing wide. Sometimes it's going to be big, great, and you're going to have this great conversations. And other days you're just going to do your little thing and you're going to move on and it's going to be just fine. So pick one of those times a day. Maybe you're bathing your toddler. You're probably not bathing your 15-year-old. That would be weird.
That would be a little unusual. I mean, I do have to like tell them multiple times, you smell, go and have a shower. Have you put on deodorant? Will you please clean yourself?
I know. Yes,
Bless
that is.
them.
I have a 13-year-old who we're like, okay, this is like the really important thing right now, getting into a regular habit of bathing. Anyway.
No,
But
for all the parents out there in the same camp, we are on your team. Keep going. You will raise an adult that is clean and smells pleasant. Just keep consistency is the key.
that's the goal. Well, and that's the whole thing with the little habits too. It's just consistency. It's just the little things done consistently. And you wouldn't think that they would make a big impact. And it's not about being legalistic with the little things that we're doing. It's just about doing the next little thing that God has called us to and trusting that he's going to bring the fruit. Because really that is what happens. The closer we draw to God, the more he brings that fruit in our lives.
I once thought Dan, my husband, was super wise. I mean, I do think he is wise, just to clarify. But I once thought he was having a really wise moment because we were having a chat about, what should we do about a particular situation. He was like, you just have to do the next right thing. And the way he phrased it, I was like, wow, that's really deep. And then I realized he'd just been watching Frozen 2 and Anna has a whole song about do the next right thing. And I just hadn't seen the movie yet. And so here am I being like, wow, my husband is so wise, and he's actually just quoting Disney. So even Disney can point us in the right direction from time to time. But there's so much truth and freedom in that. Like you say, it's not something to get legalistic about. This isn't something to create. Oh, I'm a big list. I love a list. I love a tick box. We don't need to kind of create tick boxes to hammer things into our kids. This is an invitation. It's an invitation from God to say, let me help show you how and where and when in your normal day, you still being you don't have to kind of become some different mom or some different person in order to disciple your kids. God picked you to be the parent for your child or your children. And so you can do that. And I just would love to add in a caveat for those who maybe don't have kids, or you're maybe a single person, or maybe you've wanted to have children and you haven't, or whatever it might be. There's a whole host of individuals who I think these truths still apply, right? I still think it's really important to remember that we have got co-workers and friends and maybe flatmates and family members maybe who don't know God at all, or just the cashier that we see every Tuesday when we do the same supermarket shop, whoever it might be. We have an opportunity for these little moments of connection, these little touch points whereby we can bless someone with our words without it having to be this whole holy, I'm now going to read from Numbers 6 and pray the Lord's blessing over you. We don't need to be weird about it. Yeah, we don't need to be weird about it, but we can just be a bit like, oh, thank you so much. Like, God bless you for bringing in my food delivery or whatever it might be. My mum used to pray when me and my brothers were kids that there would be what she called a significant other in our lives. And I think she really wisely recognized that even though she was our mum, we wouldn't always want to go to her as we got older for everything. And I mean, that's the dream, that you have that sort of relationship with your child and you are super close. But I know that growing up, there were times when I didn't want to talk to my mum about stuff, but I did want to talk to my youth pastor. And I had this amazing youth leader at my church who was, I guess, the significant other that my mum had prayed for. And in the same way, as adults, we might be significant others to other people that people have prayed for, that we can be God's voice in their life. We can be encouragers. We can be cheerleaders. We can be signposts back to Jesus. Because I think one of the important things is that parents and families need the church community to be the village, to help model Jesus and model relationship and model what it is to love God, because not all kids are going to look at their parents and go, I want to be just like you when I grow up. But if they're in a community of believers who are different, who have different experiences, who have different understandings, who worship with different expressions, then they're going to go, oh, okay, knowing God isn't about fitting into a particular mold. It's about being the me that he's made me to be in relationship with him. And so I just wanted to do a shout out for those of us who maybe you're not a parent. We still need you. And we still celebrate your uniqueness and what you can bring to the table in terms of also bringing little habits and planting these little seeds in lives as you go about just being you and loving God with all that you are. So tell me, Christie, a little bit more. How has this transition from children's ministry to more of a family's ministry led to where you're at now and what you're up to these days?
Well, I started doing those little classes that I was telling you about, and I would literally force parents to say, okay, if you're dropping off your child in a 3-year-old's class today, you actually have to stay with them. We're not accepting any unparented children, and we would do classes. Anyway, that kind of, morphed and changed a little bit over the years, and I worked at that church for about 12 years. And near the end of it, I was thinking, I really am just feeling more this pull toward directly going to more parents, not just the parents in my church community. And so I guess I retired from my job. We still go to the same church. We still love the church. There was nothing bad about why I left. I retired and I started writing children's books and children's ministry resources. And then slowly along the way, I developed this membership community, and in this membership community started developing and diving deeper into this idea of the little habits and this faith growth cycle. And just through all that then came this book that I now have. So that was a bit of a surprise. I wasn't expecting to write for adults. I thought that I was going to write for children. But so that is what I do now, I guess.
So tell us more about your book that you've is it just launched or it's about to launch?
It came out on July 9th.
Okay, so it's brand new in the book world. Tell us a little bit more about it. And then also we will put a link as well where people can get a copy for themselves.
Absolutely. Well, it's called Little Habits, Big Faith. And it's really just what I just told you about. It's about the process of looking at our days and saying, God, what do you want to change in my day? And where's a good spot for some spiritual habit where I can just tune our hearts back to Christ? And then how to actually get that in your life. So it's immensely practical. It gives you a bazillion ideas of things that you could do, not that you should do, but that you could do, so that you can
invitation.
Make this work for your family. Yeah. So it's very much kind of a mix and match, choose your own adventure with God sort of book, but also very practical because I love science. I actually have a biology degree, so I love reading things like the habit formation books that came out. I read all of them. And so I take kind of the modern science of habit formation and apply it to how to get these little habits into our days. Not so that we can become legalistic, but so that we can have these regular moments in our days where I like to think of it as like I'm taking my child's chin and I'm just pointing back to Christ. And even my own chin, right? We're just taking our chins and we're just pointing back because we all forget to look at God throughout our days. Absolutely. And for me, as I mentioned, and I can't be the only one who grew up just, with just going to church. I didn't know how to turn my face back to God unless it was in the context of a Bible study or a Sunday school class or something very official. Yeah. So I pray that my children are, will have learned how to do that in their day-to-day life. And it's changed the way that I am too. I'm not talking about my book anymore, but it's changed the way that I am because now I am more capable of, taking those teachable moments. Those, that's the dream, right? Oh, I just want to have those teachable moments. Well, some of us don't know how to find those because we're not used to talking about God in our family at all. We can't grab those teachable moments because talking about God or referring to Bible or just praying at the spur of the moment is weird for us.
I would say that was a really similar growing up experience for me as well, in that I also grew up in a Christian home, but we didn't ever sit around talking about faith, my mum, bless her, she did have those little connection points, whether it was at bedtime or whatever it might be, and she was really good at offering to pray, but I was a little bit mean child, and I was like, "Meh, you're my mum, don't want to know." But I really love when you're talking about the kind of habit formation and the biology behind that, because I too am big into neuroplasticity and how we do get transformed by the renewing of our mind, how we can create these new neural pathways. And that was God's idea for us before it was discovered in science, and how the two go together so beautifully and so brilliantly. And, if you are somebody sitting there feeling stuck and going, I can't do this. It's impossible. I don't know how to. One, Christie's written a resource for you that's going to help you do that. And two, God has wired your brain in such a way that you're not going to stay stuck, and it is possible to learn new habits and to learn new ways of doing things that are going to lead to life and freedom. So that's super cool. Christie, when we were getting to know each other, one of the things that you mentioned, and I was like, oh, hello, that sounds interesting, is that you have learned some things about God, because this podcast all about growing, all about going, all about growing in our understanding of who God is, so we can grow in our understanding of who we are in light of that, so we can go. One of the things that you mentioned was that you learned some things about God through donating a kidney. Now, I'm going to hazard a guess that that is not the usual experience for our listeners, but this sounds like a super interesting story. So do you want to tell me more how that came about? How did you spontaneously donate a kidney?
Well, it wasn't as spontaneous as it sounds, although looking back on it, I think, oh, maybe it was kind of spontaneous. So what happened was that I was on Facebook, and I had seen a mom who was also from Canada, and she was a young mom. Her son was the same age as one of my boys. And she said, I need a kidney. I am this blood type, and I just need a kidney so that I can be around for my son. And I thought, oh, that's lovely. And then kind of, I thought, apparently I saved it. I didn't know you could save things on Facebook at that time. So then because I'd saved it, it came back into my feed again. And I thought, see. And then it kind of hit me a little bit deeper. I kind of felt like God was moving my heart to maybe consider doing this. So I was at work at the time. I don't know why I was on Facebook at work, but
research.
I'm sure that's not uncommon. I went and talked to one of my coworkers, and I was like, I feel like God might be asking me to donate a kidney. Is that weird? And she said, no, that's not weird. You're going to need to pray about that and talk with your husband about that. So I did. And my husband said, it's your body. And I thought, well, I know, but I mean, there's a recovery. There's a chance that it could go wrong. I mean, this has got to be your decision too. You have to be actually okay with this. So he was, and then I made the phone call. Anyway, very long story short, I ended up not donating a kidney to her, but because she already had a match because of that Facebook post. But they said, could we put you into the anonymous donor program? So I did, and I ended up donating a kidney to somebody that I'd never met before, and I have never met since. So I really felt at the time, I was reading the book of Esther, and I felt like she says, who knows but that, or Mordecai says to her, who knows but that God has put you in this position for just such a time as this. And I thought, I'm healthy. My husband is willing to let me do this. It really felt like God was saying that to me. And I also was listening to this sermon, and they were talking about how, I think it was John who said, John, the guy out in the desert, the locust John, who said, if you have 2 cloaks, give one away. And I thought, well, I don't have 2 cloaks. Well, I probably do, but I have 2 kidneys, and I actually don't need 2 to survive. Wow. So it was kind of all these things that were percolating in my brain at the same time that led me to this. And it was a long process. They do like psychology tests on you and all kinds of tests. They really want to make sure that you're not being coerced and that you're in your right mind and that you're healthy enough to do this, because they're actually doing harm to you, which kind of goes against the Hippocratic Oath. Yeah. So they really want to make sure that this is a really good fit for you. And in the end, my kidneys were perfect. They were completely 50-50, which is unusual for kidneys. So they were able to take the one that was easier to get out, and leaving me with a perfectly healthy kidney on the other side. But here's the clincher. I have never heard back from the person. So all I know is that there was a young family involved. That was the only thing that they were allowed to tell me. And usually there's through the anonymous program, the person who receives the kidney will often reach out and say thank you. And that was in 2018. So that was 6 years ago. And I've never heard back from the person. Wow. And for a while, it was kind of like, are you ever going to reach out? I'd love to meet you. Not that I was annoyed that they didn't thank me, but I thought it would be really cool to meet you.
But I gave you a kidney.
I know, exactly. We're sharing body parts here. Doesn't that make us friends? But then I realized this was just another thing that God was teaching me about who he is. The gift was given. I will not take it back, and I do not regret it. whether that person acknowledges the gift and says thank you or not, the gift is given and is given freely. And so for me, that was like, God was showing me, like, my gift is given. It is given freely. And it is up to everyone to say, to acknowledge that back. But whether or not they acknowledge it, the gift is still given. God's like, oh, I can't believe it. I should not have let my son die on the cross.
See, I feel like that if I was God, I would be tempted to have that attitude, I'd be like, come on, people, do you not get it? Do you not get it? And yet he's so gracious. That's such a good visual aid and metaphor and reminder. That's amazing. I love that. Yeah, I love that you surreptitiously saved something on Facebook and didn't even know how to. And just from something as simple as that, this whole story unfolded that has changed someone's life, even if you don't know the outcome of exactly how, why, or when. Or it's amazing. That's such a cool story.
Yeah. So my husband says, they probably just don't want to impinge on you anymore. You've already given them an entire kidney. They don't want to. Yeah. But I just think it'd be cool to know them. But it was maybe just part of God's plan for something that he was teaching me, right? That, they're fine. They don't need to thank me in order to be fine. At least I think they're fine.
Yeah.
But what he showed me about the unconditionalness of his love and his gift was pretty powerful.
That's so good. It's making me think of the passage in the New Testament where Jesus heals the 10 and only one comes back to say thank you. And I'm like, ooh, in that context, when I think of the gift that God gave us is so much more than a kidney. He gave his son. Am I actually like the 9, really? Even though I'm like, yeah, cool. The way that I live and the choices that I make on a day-to-day basis, am I forgetting to come back? Am I just now going on with my new kidney and kind of not really thinking about the sacrifice someone else made for that? I don't know. That's really cool to think through and to consider.
Yeah.
I am sitting and looking at you, Christie, and I can see a couple of your kids' books in the background. And can you tell me a little bit about them, what they are, what's the storyline, or the age range that they're written for?
For sure. So I have Quinn's Promise Rock and Quinn Says Goodbye, although Quinn Says Goodbye is unfortunately out of print. But they're really about where God is when I'm anxious or when life is hurting. So that came out of a time in my life when I was both dealing with an anxious child and processing through the loss of my sister, she died in a car accident a long, long time ago, but it took me a very long time to process that. So it's just a lighthearted, kindly way of talking about how God is with us, even in our troubles. And then I have a mother and son prayer journal, which is a walk through the life and writings of King David. And so it's a devotional, but it's also a way to connect with your son and to help him learn how to pray, and then also to write prayers for him. So it's kind of like all in one.
I love that. And so what sort of age range would you say be the sweet spot for that prayer journal?
I would say 6 to 12, maybe 13. It does, younger ones can appreciate it and do it. But I did find that as I was doing it with my 3 boys, that the older they got, the better the conversations got.
Nice.
So you could do it again. Like you could do it with a 6-year-old, and then 4 years later, when they've completely forgotten about everything, you could do it again.
You could regurgitate the same information. As we've learned with the repetitiveness of needing to tell them to shower, I'm pretty sure the same is true of needing to repeat truth. I once decided that I wanted to encourage my kids a little bit more intentionally, and I like this idea of you can write prayers that they get to see and vice versa. And I bought 3 little notebooks, and I kind of set it up with the kids that anyone is allowed to write in anyone else's book, and only if it's an encouraging thing or something that you like about them or something you want to celebrate or whatever. And I mean, I'm a really good starter. I'm not such a great finisher. But for a season and a period, I was pretty good. If I was putting something away in their room or walking by, I'd kind of grab it. And some of them were just directly to the child, but some of them were like little mini prayers of like, God, I thank you so much for this kid, for this character trait I see in them, or for the fact that they make me laugh, or, you know, whatever it might be. And it wasn't all super deep and spiritual all the time. Sometimes it would be, I saw you be kind to your sister today. That made me really happy. Well done. Yay. And I just think it's these little habits, these little things that we can do that at the end of the day don't take hours of planning. It can be spontaneous and in the moment, a little encouragement, a little celebration, a little high five for whatever it might be. Observing God at work in their lives and calling it out so that they can make that connection too, I think, to this isn't just a good thing that we do. This is a way of honoring God or loving him or worshiping him and drawing closer to him by the way that we're loving others. So that's pretty epic. What would you say to the parent who has got maybe older kids who perhaps they've got prodigals, perhaps their kids are on the way out of the home, mid to late teens, maybe even older, and they have not, for whatever reason, decided that Jesus is somebody they want to know in a meaningful way right now? To those parents who, you know, they're not in the we're brushing teeth together every day and I'm making your packed lunch every day. They're in a different season. Their kids are moving away from them, maybe emotionally, maybe geographically, maybe spiritually, they've already departed. What would your encouragement be to parents who find themselves in that season?
First of all, if you have a prodigal, just remember that God has prodigals too, and he's the perfect father. So it's not necessarily a reflection on your parenting. All of our children have to make their own decision whether they're going to follow Christ or not for the entire life. And they may look like they're going to follow him, and then when they're 60, they may fall off, or they may look like they're not going to follow him, and then when they're 40, they turn back to him. There's no way that we can know those things. So possibly when they're leaving our home, we're in the best place because we're in the place where we actually can't really impact anything except through our prayers. And God does invite us to partner with him through prayer. And I've been going to this early Wednesday morning prayer group, 6:30 in the morning.
Oh, well done.
But I've just been learning so much about how God wants to work with us in prayer. Prayer is, you know, not just about our hearts being, you know, peaceful because we're with him. God actually does invite us to change the world through partnering with him in prayer. And so it's not like it's not a magic wand, like where we just get to pray for our adult child and they're going to immediately turn around. But God does change things because of our prayers. So I would just say, keep praying. Keep praying for that significant other, like you were saying before.
It's so good. That's so good. And I don't often talk about the Devoted Collective on this podcast, which is a business ministry that I run with a friend, and we have an international team who are involved. But one of the things that we are really passionate about is prayer, and we do have a resource. We have a book called Prayers for a Generation, and I think it came out of one mum's desire to intercede, not just for her own children, but for all children, and this generation that are coming up underneath us, they belong to Jesus. And when we forget that and we think that it's all on us, then that's when the striving and the stress and the grittiness between relationships come, because we're putting all this pressure that doesn't need to be there. But if we stand in the gap and if we join our voice with others and pray for these children, for this generation, we get to raise them up. We get to be part of their story and their future. And so if you're looking for a resource, Prayers for a Generation, and it's 40 devotions written by parents around the globe. It's got scriptures to pray over your kids. It's got a prayer starter. And it is just an operation to stand in the gap and raise a generation. I don't know about you, Christie. Do you know of any other really great resources to help pray aside from the journal that you've created for mums and sons? Are there other resources that kind of spring to mind from all your years experience? Because I know that when I was in children's ministry, I I just was reading all the kids' Bibles and all the kids' books and like collecting things. And I just became a little bit of a treasure trove for great resources for kids and parents. Is there anything that springs to mind that you would want to recommend or say, this is a really cool resource that could help you?
I would say that actually there's a ministry called Million Praying Moms. So just on the topic of what we were just talking about. So she has a Everyday Prayers podcast that comes out, I think, 5 times a week. And it's got prayers for yourself and your children. And you could be praying those over your adult children as well. It doesn't matter what age they are, or your grandchildren, right?
Yeah. Yep. Or the children in your church, or the children in your street, or if you're a teacher, the children in your class, or, so many ways that we can be covering the kids around us. That's great. Million Praying Mums, you say?
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Steve, thank you so much for spending some time chatting with us about ways that we can invest in our children, both in the home and those around us. And I would love it if you would be able to pray for those of us listening. And I believe you have a prayer that's in your book that you could pray over us and for us.
Absolutely. God, we thank you that you are the maker of all creation. You are the maker of our families, and you are the lover of our souls. You are holy and just, and you have called us according to your purpose. Thank you for inviting us into relationship with you. Give us the desire for more of you each day. And you've promised that we can approach your throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in times of need. So our time of need is now, and we desperately need your help. Help us to trust you with all our hearts and lean not on our own understanding when it comes to spiritually parenting the children around us in our lives. We're confident that you are the one who started this good work in our families and in our churches and in our ministries, and you are the one who will carry it to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. This is all for your glory, not ours. We are confident that you equip the called, and as I am called to spiritually parent or to spiritually lead the children of my life, we will be able to do all this through you, the one who gives us strength. Help us to remember that as garden soil causes seeds to grow, you are the one who will ultimately make righteousness and praise spring up in our families. In the power of your holy name, we claim your promise that the children around us will grow up to be called oaks of righteousness. May our family grow in righteousness and be part of your family forever. May we be the work of your hands for the display of your splendor. May our children and the children around us be a planting of the Lord that brings honor and glory to your name. In your powerful, perfect, and holy name. Amen.
Amen and amen. Christy, what a prayer. That is so good. Thank you so much. If people want to connect with you, how and where is the best way to do that?
Well, I'm on social media, mostly on Instagram at Little Shoots Deep Roots, and also I have a website with a lot of free resources on it. So if you are a parent or a grandparent and you're thinking, I really do want to have these small habits in my life, I have a free resource just on my main website, which is littleshootsdeeproots.com. And you can just go to the front page there and it'll point you to a free resource called the Start Little Guide. So people can grab that if they want.
Fabulous. That's awesome. Christy, thank you so much for joining us on the Grow and Go podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Grow and Go. I would love to connect with you on Instagram. Find me at Hello M Tyler. That's Hello EMTYLER. And let me know what encouraged you today. If this episode blessed you, please take a moment to share it with a friend or leave a quick review. These things really do help others discover the podcast. But until next time, keep growing and going.